So, the agenda is served by people acquiescing to house arrest and to doing what the government tells them to do in fine detail with regard to this pandemic. It is not served by people protesting against that. And so that is demonized, suppressed, etc. But the foundation of the few controlling the many, at any time in human history, it's a fundamental foundation of everything. You must divide and rule the many. So it serves the agenda of divide and rule to have people under house arrest and everyone kept apart. It serves them with social distancing where everyone is kept apart, divide. It serves them to have people wearing masks, which means that the human discourse and interaction is destroyed. So social distancing, masks, house arrest must happen. But hold on a second. It also serves the agenda of divide and rule to have massive racial division. What has happened, well, almost out of nowhere, since these protests and riots began in the wake of the George Floyd situation? It has driven people apart. It is dividing society. Now that serves the agenda. And so social distancing, masks, house arrest is followed by no social distancing in the riots and the protests, but because both serve the agenda of divide, you have this apparent contradiction of social distancing imposed and then social distancing completely ignored. It's not a problem. But there's a common denominator between the two. They both serve the agenda of dividing and ruling the population. And this was captured, Brian, so perfectly in one of the most ludicrous documents I've ever seen. And it was in the last week when about 1,000 doctors and medical people and others signed a letter when the protests and the riots began. And they said, these protests, brackets, including riots, should not be stopped because of the danger of the infectious nature of COVID-19. Because it's more important that these protests take place and be allowed to take place than what they claim is an infectious disease. I don't accept that, but they do. And in this same letter, they said, but this does not mean there should be a permissive attitude and acceptance of other protests, particularly, it said, protests against stay-at-home orders. So in that one letter, you had this ridiculous contradiction that it's okay to protest without social distancing, but only if you protest here against this. But other protests, it's not. It's still dangerous. And you think that is crazy. That crazy. How can they justify that? Serves the agenda. Serves the agenda. That's what's going on. And so, in this year of extraordinary happenings, we now have the first woke virus. The first one in human history. A woke virus that says, if you protest against this, I'll leave you alone. But if you protest against that, I'm coming for you. And of course that's ludicrous, but you've got to see this common denominator. And if people take this and look at the world from this perspective, the common theme is, does it serve the agenda or does it not? They will see across the great spectrum of human society how what is allowed and encouraged and promoted serves the agenda, and what is suppressed, demonized, and prevented challenges the agenda. It's so simple, and that's why on the face of it we're seeing madness. But if you come here, there's method in the madness.
How do you get people to see that? Because, you know, I've had a lot of conversations offline with friends of mine, and, you know, black people in America see this happen, you know, another act of police violence, you know, another scenario of rioting like we saw in Watts in 65, Rodney King in 92, and again, and they're like, I'm angry. And it seems like a systemic issue of, you know, police racism. How do you get someone like that to step out of the anger and emotion and try to look at it from this perspective that you're bringing? Because they have a right to be angry, and yet, like you said, they're actually potentially playing into someone else's agenda.
Well, if people don't want to be scammed, first of all, they have to get informed, and they have to stop getting all their perceptions from the mainstream media. You know, because you look at the what we might call the conservative or political right, what you might call the moderate political right, and you look at the woke mentality, and they may be at odds with each other, but overwhelmingly they're getting their information from the same mainstream sources. They're just seeing that information in a different way. When you step back from mainstream sources and you look at alternative sources where narratives are being questioned instead of parroted and repeated, then you can start to see how the dots connect. You see, it's not what is happening that is the point of revelatory understanding. It's why it's happening. It's context. Yes, this is happening, okay, and if you react only on the basis of this is happening, then you can get sucked in and start behaving in ways that the authorities and the cult behind the authorities want you to act. But if you stop and you ask, why is this happening? Then you can start to get context. See, what's missing is context. You know, the mainstream media will tell you that something's happening. They'll put their own spin on it, of course, but they'll tell you that something's happening. But they won't tell you accurately, unbiasedly, why it's happening. So when I have this phrase, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. If you don't know where the world's being taken and who by, and the techniques of manipulation that take us there, then the world is a random place. You look at a newspaper and you look at the news or whatever, and lots of random things are happening. And it's very difficult, almost impossible, it is impossible, from that perspective of perceptual randomness to make sense of the world. Not going to do it. But when you know where the world's being taken, you know basically who's taking us there, why, and the techniques of manipulation to take us there, suddenly randomness disappears. Because what is random to most people becomes a very clear sequence of events that is taking us in a very obvious direction towards the outcome. And so, like I say, fundamental to manipulating humanity to take this journey towards the global Orwellian state is to set the target population at war with itself.